Employees of Disney, what is the craziest thing you've seen happen in the park? I was working in the kitchen at Cinderella's castle when this family of 4 came in for their dinner. About halfway through the dinner, the husband politely stands up and taps his glass for attention. He announced that his wife of 15 years has been cheating on him for over a year. The entire place stood still in shock. He motioned for his kids, paid the waitress, and left the wife crying at the table. Overnight cast member here. Please leave your cremated loved ones at home. Stop dumping them in haunted mansion. They just get vacuumed up and disposed of. A co-worker of mine at Disney World once helped escort Michael Jackson through some employee-only areas to avoid the crowd surrounding him. He got an autograph on a napkin. MJ used to sneak in wearing a disguise and go around solo. Or at least that's what the old-timers that used to work Captain EO told me. I was a Disney employee for the summer. My 2 favorite memories. 1. Coming out of a bathroom stall and washing my hands next to half-dressed Mary Poppins. 2. I was sitting with a group of guys by where Mickey and Minnie get dressed. When they came out, the guys started catcalling Minnie. The guy that was Mickey said, in a perfect Mickey voice, "If you look at my girlfriend again, I'm gonna pop ya." I worked ODV, outdoor vending. One night I witnessed Tinkerbell get stuck on her wire above the castle during the fireworks show in '05. He almost got burned up by those fireballs during the Indiana Jones portion of the show. They eventually turned off the spotlight on her and she just hung there until they were able to reel her in back to the Matterhorn. LOL. Also I say she because the Tinkerbell that flies is played by both male and female actors. That, and seeing Alice on her cell phone cussing out her boyfriend while smoking a cigarette in between was pretty friggin' hilarious. Used to work attractions at Anaheim Land. On the Indiana Jones adventure there are 3 48 inches height checkpoints which small guests must hit, and there's often drama here. One of the lowest points in my Disney career was having to height check a midget. I couldn't make eye contact. All he said was, "Really?" and I hung my head in shame and nodded. Another time an African American family had made it all the way down to the last checkpoint, which was in the station. The poor kid was too short, but the mom lost her mind when I said her child couldn't ride. She started screaming at the top of her lungs that this sectarian mother won't let my precious baby girl on the ride. "You are racist. You are sectarian, etc. etc." Cleared out the station. Temporarily shut down the ride. She was escorted out and banned from the park. TLDR. Height checked a midget. Didn't let a little girl ride because she was black. Former ride operator here. If you haven't been called a sectarian butthole child hater at least once a week, you aren't doing it right. I was a safari driver at the Kilimanjaro Safari attraction in Animal Kingdom. We had this elephant named Willy. Willy was an exhibitionist. I was driving a safari one day, spewing out facts about elephants when I hear a tiny voice from the back of the truck yell, "MOOOOM. He has 5 legs." I turn, and sure enough, there's Willy, standing with his 5-foot-long dong just swaying in the Florida breeze. I had to turn my mic off. I was laughing so hard. TLDR. Elephant dong. Willy just liked to show his namesake off. Former cast member in Disney World. I picked up a shift at Frontierland Foods. I was warned beforehand that in the kitchen there was a lot of animosity between the Spanish and Haitian cast members. So midway through my shift there's a lot of yelling back and forth between the two groups, and it culminates with one of the older Haitian dudes taking a cooking sheet, not one of those flimsy aluminum foil ones, the actual metal ones, and bashed him over the head with it hard as heck. Needless to say, that was the last time I picked up a shift anywhere. Not a cast member, but I witnessed a cast member do this. I was in line at Disneyland, California with a group of Japanese teenage tourists were ahead of me in line. I speak Japanese, so I could understand that they were making fun of Americans. They were mostly saying things to the effect of, "On TV they seem so cool, but all of these Americans are so fat and ugly." They were laughing and even occasionally pointing at people. I was just staying quiet, but then one of the cast members, who evidently also spoke Japanese, walked up to them and told them in perfect Japanese, "You guys should really be careful. Most Americans can speak Japanese." They all froze up and looked around at people, many of whom were giving them dirty looks. I nodded at them like I was backing him up, and they were horrified. They all left the line promptly afterward. I worked in Tomorrowland attractions at WDW and there were many stories, but one of the craziest was when I noticed a Down syndrome child waiting in the back hallway, not a normal place for guests. I figured he was waiting on his party to finish riding. I was bumped out of my position for a break 5-10 minutes later and he was still there. I got him to walk down to the unload area with me, figuring his family was probably freaking out about where he was. No one was down there waiting for him. I waited for 15 minutes and realized his family was not on the ride. After calling managers and coordinators conducting a search throughout Tomorrowland, we found his family riding Buzz Lightyear Space Ranger Spin. They just left him at space. I have never been so upset at work. There are so many others, but this one always comes to mind. As my name implies, I work at WDW as a cast member. There are a lot of crazy things I'd rather not get into, but the worst was one night during the fireworks exit. We had a bunch of 20-year-olds being dumbasses on the resort platform. They start punching each other in the arms, being the usual pricks to each other. One of them ended up missing his friend and cold clocking a 12-year-old girl. 12-year-old girl's dad had to be 6 feet 4 inches and 320 pounds. And built. I mean really built. It took 4 security guards and 2 Orange County deputies to pull the guy off the bloody pulp that remained of the kid. His friend ended up jumping into the bushes to get away from one seriously angry father. I worked in monorails too. About a year or so ago, a guest got off at Epcot station and then told the CM at unload he was going to be sick. The CM opened up the trash can so he could puke in it easier. The guest then proceeded to take off his cloths and took a massive dump in the trash can. People, man. My brother-in-law worked there in the student program. 2 things he told me were the worst. 1. This couple were trying to ride Space Mountain and had a black duffel bag. He heard something come from the bag, so he asked them to open it. They refused. Security comes, forces them to open it. It was their 6-month-old baby. 2. I don't remember what attraction it was for, but he said a little boy from Make-A-Wish got to go to the front of every line. This one lady saw it and bitched so loud about how this little trash kid didn't deserve to cut in lines and a bunch of other bulls. He described the look on the boys' parents' faces as nothing but nightmarish, heartbreaking crap. He told the lady to get out of line and stop being such a bee. Explained that the kid was with Make-A-Wish. She apparently didn't care and asked for a manager. Beat a manager. She is banned from WDW. My brother-in-law almost lost his job right there due to all of the commotion that was caused. Luckily he didn't. My mother worked there in the 80s and used to run the booth where you can get your name sewn into the back of Mickey Mouse ear hats. Well, she remembers one day getting the request for an Uday and Kusei hat. Turns out Saddam's 2 sons were visiting the park and wanted a pair of ears. Not real crazy, but fairly interesting. My favorite story is when a woman was dressed as Snow White in the parks, belligerently drunk and pretending to be the character by signing autographs and taking pictures with people. She was escorted out by the PD and caused a huge scene and resisted arrest. There's a photo hung up backstage in one of the parks of it. People swaddling handles of vodka like newborns and stowing them in the undercarriage of their strollers to smuggle them into Magic Kingdom. I was in the middle of a brewing international feud between a group of Brazilians and a group of Argentinians. You could tell by their tour company shirts. Standing in the middle of the crowd screaming back and forth and shoving each other. I was just merchandise at the time, so all I could do was keep innocent guests out of the way of the fight. Had another fight break out between 2 American families. A fat woman in an electric scooter ran over a child's foot. The child was shrieking bloody murder so loud that I heard it from over 50 feet away over the sound of the show going on, atmosphere sounds, and the regular din of guests. The families were screaming obscenities at each other and one father was getting in the face of the other father and started to poke his chest and used wild hand motions that basically told everyone looking on that it was about to go down. I've been shoved by a guest at a character meet and greet because I had to wait for 10 extra minutes. I told her there was no way possible for me to expedite the line and the 10-minute gap was necessary. The gap was mandatory for the level of heat we had and we were required by law to have the gap for safety reasons. So she shoved me and told me to make it happen. I've had a group of Brazilian girls try to fight me because they were being rough with the characters and I demanded they stop. These were characters that couldn't really defend themselves. A guy rubbed his nipple and asked if he could strike a deal with me so his kids could meet a character after I had closed the line. No means no, even if you're rubbing your nipples. Never really a dull moment. I wonder how rubbing your nipples could possibly help your chances of striking a deal. Grad night 2007. I was walking out of the Space Mountain break room and saw one of my guy friends at the then Honey I Shrunk the audience look like he was about to vomit, and one of my girlfriends who was laughing hysterically. Apparently in the dark of the theater, some girl decided this would be a good time to go down on her boyfriend. Little did she know, about halfway into the show, one of the effects is this little tube that comes wiggling out of the seat to simulate mice running by your legs. This hit her throat. She bit down, and he was bleeding pretty profusely. A grad night to remember. Other crazy Space Mountain stories usually involved stupid people jumping in and out of moving cars the track. The two I remember the most. One, this guy was separated from his wife getting into the first row because he wasn't paying attention and the gates closed. Space Mountain has a very delicate time system, and generally we don't have enough time to reopen gates. I was trying to shout across the track and tell him that we would pull his wife out so they could be rejoined, but I guess the CM checking lap bars asked and she said she didn't mind and didn't want to be pulled out. So he solves this problem. Was he too scared to ride alone just a dong? I will always wonder. By jumping into the track like an butthole to chase after her car when the gates opened. My first time that I ever had to hit the emergency stop. A rather tall man was sitting in the back row and looked really uncomfortable. I asked him if he was sure he wanted to ride, as his legs were smashed against the seat in front of him, and he assured me that he did. Next thing I know, I turn around to see him climbing down one of the flights of stairs leading up into the attraction. This butthole decided he wanted to get out, and because he was so tall, the lap bar didn't go down so far as to lock him in the ride. It just boggles my mind that he decided to climb out in a pitch black area, where he has no idea where any stairways walkways are, and just take his chances that he won't fall into a track and be crushed by a ride vehicle. When I was there I worked on Main Street as part of my college program. The one thing that really caught my attention was this lady wanted to buy a huge pin set we had framed and on display for the haunted mansion but not for sale. She leaves and I move positions and then I see her just run out of the store with the frame. It was insane. The other thing I remember was during the fireworks I saw a man legit beating on this woman. I left my post and told a female cast member to call the manager to meet me backstage. Ran out into the crowd, grabbed her hand and got her backstage as fast as possible. She was shaking and terrified and the police got the guy. It was a mess. What else? During the now cancelled grad nights I saw one of the kids jump into the moat around the castle. Working grad nights is the worst. I myself went to grad night and thought I was a badass. But now as an employee I see everything in a new light. Besides everyone illegally high, drunk, or on pills, high schoolers are frisky fricks. So, I was working at one of the dance club areas. I kid you not, a couple were fricking on the dance floor, dong out and all. He was escorted out by security not too long after. TL. Dr. Frisky high school kids at grad night were kicked out. Not a cast member, but once while looking around a shop at WDW Florida, a couple of guys came in and directed everyone to the next attached shop. As I was angry at being at Disney World and generally angry at life, I didn't move, so the guy just stood nearby. I looked over to the door and Michael Jackson, complete with mask, and a kid wearing a Spider-Man mask walked in. I busied myself looking at the stuff and walked over to the next shop. I also was wandering around one day away from my family looking for a place to smoke and saw Don Knotts sitting at a table behind a velvet rope. I walked over to the rope and said, "Hi." This was around 2003 or so and I was amazed at how old he looked. He was extremely nice and asked me my name and we chatted for a bit until a reporter and cameraman walked over to interview him. Security walked over and Don Knotts told them I was his friend, Ed, and I was cool. I told him I better go and let him do his interview. Thanked him and left. Extremely sweet guy. That's so sweet. Totally how imagined Don Knotts would be. I once saw the guy getting a blowjob in the Golden Horse show at Disneyland. There's a pair of couches at the top of the stairs and the second floor is usually empty after the shows finish for the day. Well, I walked up there just to check on the place and noticed a girl had her head on a guy's lap and it was covered by a blanket. There was movement. Now I knew what was going on but I acted like I didn't and said, "Oh no, is she feeling alright? Do you need me to call first aid?" The look on his face was priceless as he muttered something about her just being tired. They left shortly after. Former cast member here. I spent many years at one of their media companies, but in college I worked at a Disney call center for the Disney catalog. Eventually they opened a new division that was the Disney World Priority Seating Call Center. So, people would be calling me in Kansas, looking to make brunch reservations at Cinderella's castle. We were told to never let people know we weren't actually on the property. If a customer asked where we were located, we were told to say, "I'm at Disney." They would even write weather updates every half hour or so on a big board overlooking the call center room. It was kind of a fun job to have because they put me through training to learn every inch of the park so that I tell people about the character breakfast at this resort or the fancy schmancy dinner at the Grand Floridian Resort, etc. Not Disney, but when I worked at Universal Studios, a guest had a heart attack while waiting to board a tram and collapsed in the tram lane. Paramedics arrived, and I watched in disbelief as my supervisor ordered them to move him out of the lane while they were actively working to stabilize him so we could resume tram service. They told him to frick off. Good for them. Once I was running the main station on a ride. On the load side of the ride, a couple and their 2 kids, one 7, 8, another 10, 11 years old, were about to get on the ride when suddenly the kid, younger of the 2, pooped his swimming trunks and it went everywhere. The mom screamed "not again," and they left. We had to cycle out the ride and dump the queue. Make people leave the line on a very busy ride with a 2-hour wait. So a kid dumps in the queue, making you dump the queue. Every year in June, there's a week of gay-friendly activities in Orlando that culminates in Gay Day. A bunch of gay people go to the Magic Kingdom wearing red. One year, circa the late 90s, there was a very unfortunate coincidence. Gay Day in the park that year happened to coincide with a Marine Corps reunion in the park. The Marines were also wearing traditional Marine Corps red that day. I wasn't there, but I've heard there were many awkward moments that day. Former CM at DLR. Not in the park. I was hotels, but I saw a guy jump from the top floor of the former Wonder Tower at Disneyland Hotel. Was on the clock at the time. Ran over and it was like a giant water balloon filled with blood popped. Till inside the park. Happiest place on earth. Directly outside the park. Mayhem. Former WDW cast member. I swear most of my crazy stories come from working there. Things I've seen. 1. More than once. Adult drop trouser and take a dump next to a line of people and walk off laughing. 2. A mother climb a tree and swing down in the middle of another family's meet and greet with Beast. She didn't want to wait in line. 3. 3 people in wheelchairs in the same tree at another time. I have no idea. 4. A man tried to swim in Cinderella's moat during fireworks. I was guarding the ropes. I tackled him. 5. Snow White being thrown over the shoulder of a drunk man in Epcot in an attempt to carry her away. 6. A Brazilian tour group beat the crap out of Donald Duck. 7. Nights of Joy's Heck on Earth. The park is open to Christian youth groups and has Christian rock bands perform. During these nights extra staff is put on and extra security because there is fricking and drugs and theft happening around every corner. My managers were preparing us for it. They said if you see a bush rustle, kids are fricking behind it. The bathrooms have to be checked every 5 minutes. And any ride that goes dark for more than 3 seconds will have randy teenagers whipping their junk out. Those nights. Those terrifying nights. I went to Night of Joy and Grad night and I saw none of this. Man, I was a clueless teenager. I just wanted to ride Space Mountain as much as possible. I worked one summer at Disneyland back when Star Tours 1.0 was still the newest and coolest thing. People were really confused by it. After waiting a long 2 hours in line, one woman walked right through the Star Speeder, not realizing that she was missing the actual ride portion. The kind people in the Star Trader alerted us. and we were able to schedule her for the next flight. One very canny bloke sidled up to me and asked out of the side of his mouth, "Where did they put the tracks for that Star Tours thing? Come on, buddy, you can tell me." Geeky me was torn between blowing his mind at the concept of a simulator or insisting that he'd actually been in hyperspace. I saw children poop in line at Fantasyland. This happened a lot. Far too often. I couldn't believe it. A respectful tip of the hat here to the custodial crew. I had to work very hard to convince a family that Disneyland was more than just Tomorrowland and that they were allowed to experience a lot of other things for their money. They'd evidently arrived by monorail and been put off by the change of theme every time they got near Tomorrowland's boundaries. Maps were used. Perhaps most awkwardly, I had to tell a highly disappointed couple that the Epcot Center was in Florida. I still kinda feel bad about the looks on their faces. I worked a ride in Animal Kingdom a long time ago. Saw a 8-10 foot long snake emerge from an area with lots of plants and bushes. It slowly works its way through a line of about 200 people, weaving its way through people's legs, strollers, bags, etc. Then it just casually slips back into another wooded area. No one noticed. Sounds like you need to stop doing acid at work. Pro tip. Go to the Buffalo Wild Wings on Wednesdays right outside downtown Disney. Some of the girls still have their hair up from costuming. During gay days at Disneyland there is a lot of fricking in the bathrooms. Had a friend working custodial and cleaning a men's restroom when two men were obviously going at it in a very full bathroom during the middle of the afternoon. Disney cast members are not allowed to go in and stop them or otherwise cause a scene, so he had to wait till they were done. In walks a man with his son, who is very mad that he can't use that stall, screaming, "My son needs to go poopy." On a grad night on Pirates of the Caribbean, a girl in the back row was seen on the security cams giving her boyfriend a blowjob. As soon as he blew his load, she leaned over to spit it out when the overhead PA boomed, "Not in the water." She was so startled she swallowed. Some cast members that worked on the Jungle Cruise while I worked there got fired for growing cannabis amongst the foliage. Not in the water. Got me to laugh. Not an employee, but there was this man that had scissors on him. Not sure how he got past security with that. He approached a little girl from behind with the scissors drawn and cut the string of her balloon. I thought that was going to be much worse than it was. It's so strange that he obviously thought about doing that before going to the park and planned it out. Former WDW cast member here. Didn't directly happen to me and never saw it, but the rumor around was one of the Snow Whites and one of the Cinderellas got caught making out. Plus, whenever you see Peter Pan smoking a Pall Mall at the tunnel entrance, it's always a unique experience. Not me, but I witnessed this happen to a fellow CM. She was ringing up a guest for an item and he looked a little upset. She did the Disney thing and asked, "How's everything been going, sir? Happiest place still the happiest?" He responded with, "No, something happened today." "What's wrong?" "What happened?" she asked. "I wanted to get my Mickey ears embroidered, but they wouldn't do it," he replied. She inquiries, "What did you want embroidered on it?" "I wanted it to say, God hates F, but those pricks said it was against policy," he said bitterly. She wasn't so nice to him after that. Man, it must suck to be the saddest butthole at the happiest place on earth. I worked at Disneyland for a few months in 2006. 1. I had an evening shift at the It's a Small World store. During the fireworks, we had to stay in the store with the metal screens pulled down. It was pitch dark and we had a table of Tickle Me Elmos. Every time a firework went off, the store would shake and the Tickle Me Elmos would laugh and fall off the table into a sort of laughing, writhing Elmo orgy. 2. Also, public nudity in downtown Disney. A woman was walking next to her husband, boyfriend, brother, and her boobs were just hanging out of her tank top. No bra. The security had to ask her to cover up, but it was a white tank top. Not Disney, but probably my only chance to tell this story on here. I worked operations on the Terminator show at Universal Studios. One day I saw this older Indian couple visit the show at least 3 times. They were easy to spot as they were wearing the traditional Hindu garb. Well, anyways, the next day I spot the same couple exiting the show, except this time they were accompanied by a younger man I assumed to be their son. Their son stopped and asked me, "Is there anything else to do here, or is this the only attraction in the park?" I was astounded. What the heck did that old couple do all day? TLDR. Old couple thinks the only attraction at Universal Studios is the Terminator show for 2 days. I think this is my favorite. I'm not a Disney employee and the story isn't that crazy, so I really have no business commenting. But those guys have eyes like hawks. I had a couple mini air horns in my bag and they told me I couldn't bring them in. I said I was going to take them back to my car. I walked a quarter mile away and tucked them in my socks. As I walked back in, a guy flipped open his Disney badge, no joke, and told me I needed to give him the air horns. I wasn't even mad. That was amazing. Screener at Disneyland here. If we see something you have that's forbidden, we know you will just re-hide it. We have people in front of us and behind us that are always watching and we can call them to follow you once we know you have something. It's actually really fun to bust people lying like that. Some people flip their crap. I worked at the safari at Animal Kingdom for a while and had a few non-guest related crazy things happen. 1. In February 2008 a truck caught on fire, flashing flames between the cab and the guest section of the truck. While not driving at the time, I helped dump just about all of Africa and joined a group of probably 35-40 safari drivers repeating the same BS over and over to guests. 2. Later in my CP program, I was driving through one of the elephant sections and saw an alligator hanging out in the water. No clue how it got there. 3. Guest related 1. I was on my rare parade duty, which is quite stressful. The logistics of Animal Kingdom's parade are pretty crappy. Once the parade gets going, you're pretty much stuck where you are. One guy decides he really needs to get to the other side of the street and is about to run out in front of a very heavy float that wouldn't be able to stop. Got to him just in time. Kinda half tackled him until I could explain how he almost died. The Floridian government estimates there to be at least 1 alligator per body of water. The craziest thing that ever happened to me personally is the time when I had to be out at Fast Pass distribution. I was standing out there telling everyone that we are out of Fast Passes when this really large overweight 8-year-old Asian kid rides up to me on a rascal scooter. He demands passes and when I tell him we are out, he demands to ride the ride. I tell him he can wait in line, 120 minutes wait, and he gets really upset and guns his scooter into my leg then rides away. I was so shocked and amused I did not call security on him. Other than that I have really enjoyed my time working at Disney. TLDR. The Asian embodiment of Cartman ran intentionally into my leg with a rascal scooter when I could not give him fast passes. Never worked there, but one day when I was in line for a ride, I think it was Space Mountain, this little girl in front of me was complaining she had to go to the bathroom. They were front of the line so her parents didn't want to leave the line. They argue and eventually the girl squats down and shoots on the ground. She then picks up her turd and holds it up to her mom's face. If that isn't enough, her mom then proceeded to puke all over the ground. The little girl looked like we was about 8. TLDR. Little girl's poops on ground, picks it up and her mom pukes. The aristocrats. Former Disney employee checking in. I'm a little late but here it goes. Back in the day, I used to work Space Mountain in Magic Kingdom. You would have your typical stuff to deal with. Vomit, food, shoes falling off, etc. One day, we put a group of kids, one of which was admittedly too small to be on the ride, but we let him on because his bigger sister said she'd hold on to him, in their seats, let them go, get back to chatting. When they finally come back, 2 of them are missing, the boy and his sister. So, naturally, we just completely lose our crap. We all let a kid too small get on the ride. We could lose our freaking jobs for that. We could go to prison for that. We shut down the ride, tell everyone someone vomited all over the seats, and go looking for this kid and his sister. We literally had to climb around Space Mountain looking for these 2, using the carts as something to hold on to. A huge pain in the butt. By the way, when we finally see them, it's bad. The boy is face down on the tracks, dead as far as we could tell, and his sister is leaning on a pole connecting to the tracks, looking completely shot and dejected. Me and 2 other employees literally just broke down and started crying for a solid 15 seconds or so before the girl bursts out laughing and her apparently not dead little brother follows suit. One of the most unbelievable experiences of my life. Worst part was we couldn't really tell anyone about it because we let a kid on that was too short. So they basically just fricked around, climbed around on a roller coaster and got away with it. So incredibly dangerous. We were so lucky. To this day, none of us knows how those kids got off the coaster. I mean, clearly something malfunctioned. They shouldn't have been able to get out in the first place. But somehow those suckers managed to do it without killing themselves. Mind-blowing and utterly horrifying. Fairground and theme park workers of Reddit. What is the biggest malfunction that went unnoticed by the public? Someone puked on the sea dragon. Maintenance didn't show up, so they just ran the ride until it went away and then they let people back on. I worked at a water park. Anytime the wave pool or a slide got shut down to adjust chemical levels or whatever, it was most likely because a kid took a crap in it. Happens all the time. I worked at a certain amusement park in Ohio that was considered America's roller coaster in 2005. That summer, the transformer generator of a particularly wicked roller coaster of a cyclonic nature blew, and we had to literally pull people back into the station with a rope tied to the car, and about 20 people. Instead of completely replacing it, they just worked at making it usable for the rest of the summer, and throughout the rest of the year, we would have the ride go into emergency shutdown mode at random times. We were told just to try turning it off and on again until the code cleared, without any inspections or anything like that. I worked there one summer and got transferred to this very ride one day. They taught me controls, but I got rotated out pretty quickly after launching the train without doing the countdown. Whoops. I worked at a small amusement park one summer. As someone else said, the biggest issues weren't the rides themselves but kids' parents not following the rules. We had one ride, I think it might be called the Paratrooper, and parents would constantly try to get their kids on the ride despite the height requirements. The only protection from falling out of that ride was a lap bar, and sometimes kids would wriggle their way pretty far under that. I wasn't working, but apparently one time a kid actually got all the way under and was holding onto the bar for dear life until the worker managed to stop the ride. Cleanup at the park was pretty disgusting. We'd pretty much just throw water on the blood vomit until it was rinsed away. Maybe we used bleach water for the blood. I can't remember. No gloves or anything for cleanup. Then we wouldn't let anyone sit in that car for the rest of the day, but as far as I knew, they didn't do a more thorough cleaning at any point. I worked for Six Flags over Texas, and while not a malfunction, most people don't know about the employees that would ride the shockwave without seatbelts and standing up. The reverse G-force would hold you in your seat as long as you sat back down after the 2 loops. One female employee decided to be brave and try to do it through the whole thing. She was ejected out of the ride after the loops at the Little Hump, a small hill that pushes you away from the seat with a negative G-force. She fell and was saved by her face hitting a guy wire before hitting the ground. One time a motorcycle from the Batman Stunt Spectacular jumped a ramp and hit a female performer during a rehearsal run. That's all I know. Oh, and that time the tube flipped on the Roaring Rapids. It made the news. And the chick dying on the Texas Giant. It made the news too. I'm having my sister tell me some stories, since she's worked at Disney World, Universal Studios, and SeaWorld. At SeaWorld she was a camp counselor over a summer. Her kids one week were 2nd and 3rd graders and she was taking them to under the dolphin area to watch them. Just so happens that at that time there was a dolphin orgy. Just 30 dolphins in one big ball going at it. They went up to go feed them, and since they were all so busy, only one fat dolphin came up to eat, while occasionally you would see some tails come up and splash. The image in my head of the fat lonely dolphin eating, while all the other dolphins are getting it on, is hilarious. I worked at Disney World for a little while, and most of the major malfunctions Disney either fixed or shut the ride down quickly. The biggest one, that I think is still there today, is the Yeti in Expedition Everest. It's a huge mammoth machine that's supposed to swing down at the riders, but it broke a while ago. The problem is to fix the Yeti would require some major work, so they just left it as is and put strobe lights on it. I don't know if they fixed it recently, but for years it didn't work. As I said, Disney tended to fix ride errors quickly, like during spring break when some idiot jumped off the log on Splash Mountain and pried Bro Bear's club off the floor and dropped it in the flume. Ride was shut down real quick. Disco Yeti. I was a ride operator at a smaller theme park for several years. The rides that had the most accidents were the ones that you would not expect. The top 3 rides for accidents in our park in order were the carousel, the go-karts and the raft ride. I went to Disney World when I was 8 and Snow White Awesome Princess was standing up against the wall taking photos. I somehow glanced behind her and saw that her dress was ripped, like her ass was completely out. She was wearing a white thong, and she was taking pictures like nothing was happening. I was 8, so I had no sexual thoughts. All I thought was you. Yikes. Sounds like she was up against the wall because she knew it was ripped and just waiting on reinforcement from other cast members. Got to value that dedication though. Some mutter years ago, I was working my summer vacation at an amusement park, running a roller coaster. I got to sit and push buttons, give the safety instructions, etc. So, we get the train full of people. I get the all clear, hit the button to start the train up the hill, when I see something out of my periphery. A guy has somehow climbed the gigantic wall surrounding the ride, and has dropped down next to the track, where I am about to send a metal train full of people at 40 miles per hour. I slam on the emergency stop button, which shuts down everything on the ride, and grab the phone for security. My coworkers come up to see what's happening, and I point to the guy down in the ride zone. He's acting weird and erratic, and is actually climbing on the roller coaster's track, and is taking off his clothes. Security tells us not to approach him, in case he's dangerous, and to move the people in line away. Meanwhile, I head up the stairs to talk to the people who are stuck in the ride. The stairs were open, metal things, extra narrow, steep, and at this point, damp. In the best of times, I hated climbing them. I get up and most of the people are calm, except for one woman who is freaking out. She's panicking that the ride is malfunctioning, and that she wants off. Now, I understand panic attacks and how you're completely slave to them. So, I'm calmly telling everyone that I was the person who hit the emergency stop, why I did it, etc. From their viewpoint, they literally could see the guy climbing up the track, security chasing after him, etc. I've called for a manager to let this lady off because I'm not able to do it. So, the manager finally arrives, lets this woman off with dire warnings about how dangerous the steps can be. By this point, the police are arriving. There's all sorts of stuff going on in the sights of the patrons as they are trying to arrest this guy. And then, a guy on the ride announces he wants off too. So, the manager lets him off. He climbs over another guest, faces the train, and calmly announces that this entire thing, the half-naked man, security, the police, all of it was just a cover up for the fact that the ride had malfunctioned and that they were all going to die. And I'll be damned if they didn't believe him. We evacuated that ride, and 2 people slipped walking down those stairs. I had to fill out massive paperwork to keep people from suing. Thankfully we were able to call a cop over to witness. After police left, the ride was started back up, with no issues. I worked at a theme park for a couple of years. One of the best malfunctions I can remember was actual damage to the ride discovered by the maintenance guy. This was a wooden roller coaster that covered quite a bit of land area. As part of the maintenance duties, they would check the concrete footers for the many structural beams. I was operating the ride and the maintenance guy told me he would be inside the ride perimeter conducting checks. Not even 2 minutes later I see him running to the maintenance shed as the ride is going up the lift. Then the phone rang. It was maintenance telling me to stop the ride. I did so without hesitation as the ride neared the top of the first lift hill. We had to extract everyone from the ride. After everyone was off the ride and we cleared the lines, I was informed that several of the concrete footers were cracked. The ride was shut down for several days and I had to deal with many angry customers. Worked at Disneyland's California Adventure in my youth. I can't talk about minor parks and carnivals, but Disney does not frick around with safety. Checks by OSHA, Occupational Safety and Health Association, would do routine checks on everything, plus safety checks before and after operation. One time, I jokingly told a coworker to emergency stop the ride because we're told to never re-stop a ride unless you see severe structural failure. Well, he did it. The complete ride came screeching to a halt. Indoor ride, no loops or anything. And, well, let's say that everyone was obviously trained and prepared for these kinds of situations. However, be aware that whatever seat you're sitting in, someone has pee in it. And I'm not talking a couple drops, either. Of all bodily fluids, I am the least afraid of pee. I'm a ride operator at one of the big theme parks. Unless you're actually in the ride during a malfunction, you're not going to be aware. Due to the nature of our ride, it doesn't matter if one vehicle goes down, we just put them on one that works. Now if the entire ride goes down, the wait time will be bumped up to steer folks away. Like someone else said, the tech crew can fix most malfunctions in about 10 minutes. The rides are all incredibly safe. If you get hurt on a ride, chances are that it was your fault. Nice try, Hammond. I'm not going to endorse your park. Not really a ride malfunction, but still a malfunction nonetheless. I worked at Islands of Adventure when I was younger, and a lady ignored the sign on the penny crushing machine in the Spider-Man store that read out of order. She put her change in, and being that the machine was out of order, it did nothing. She saw me working the register and proceeded to storm up to me and be that the machine ate her change. I looked over and asked if the out of order sign was still on it since I had placed it there maybe 30 minutes prior. She said yes and proceeded to BS me some more because I couldn't refund her. I have no way of opening the machine and I'm not going to short my register. Eventually, I got sick of her moaning and proceeded to take $1 out of my pocket and slam it on the counter with a "Here lady," and then walked away to go on break. Later that same day, our managers were investigating who had peed this lady off enough to go to the front gate and be about the penny machine and the employee. Luckily, I would wear other employees' name tags for such reasons. They never did find out who Sergio from Micronesia was. I really hated the guests at that place. Most of my co-workers were awesome. Only job I've ever walked out on. While I've never worked at a fairground, theme park, or other such location, I'll never forget the malfunction that my friends and I exploited at Dave & Buster's one night. For those of you who may not be familiar with the establishment, Dave & Buster's is sort of a restaurant, sports bar, and arcade all rolled into one. There are dozens of allegedly skill-based games from which you can win tickets, and then you can use those tickets to buy cheap prizes that you don't actually want and won't actually use. That is, of course, unless you buy a whole bunch of those sticky hand things. Those things are awesome. Anyway, on the night in question, my friends and I discovered a game in which you were supposed to hit a button at just the right time to make a ball drop into a numbered ring. It was designed to be insanely difficult, and in fact it might have been impossible, had it not been for the hand-sized hole in one side of the machine. We took turns playing the game, which involved acting like we were trying to time our button presses, then catching the ball as it fell and quickly depositing it into the highest scoring ring. We managed to rack up several hundred tickets in this way, but our best discovery came when we were ready to turn those tickets in. It used to be that when you turned in tickets for prizes, arcades would run them through a counting machine. At Dave & Buster's, we discovered that they used a scale to determine how many tickets a customer had accumulated. Also, it happened to be positioned in such a way that if one were to lean on the counter at just the right angle, they'd be able to push down on the scale during the weighing process. By the end of the outing, my friends and I had actually managed to buy a $20 piece of schlock for the low price of only $20. And at one of those arcades, that's definitely a victory. If I recall correctly, we left that night with a vaguely futuristic looking alarm clock. That was only because they were out of those sticky hand things, though. Another former Disney cast member here. As others have said, safety is number one with our rides. In fact, the worst malfunction I experienced on my ride was a seatbelt fault. Basically, the ride couldn't tell that a seat was buckled, so we couldn't launch the ride until it was cleared. We had to get a maintenance EM in to clear it before starting the ride. However, I guess the biggest unnoticed thing I experienced was a bomb threat. There was a rather large piece of luggage left unattended by our ride, so we formed a human barrier around the area to keep guests from walking near it in case it was dangerous. Some people were a little annoyed that we were blocking their path, but otherwise they didn't question it. After it was cleared by security and taken to Lost and Found, we just went back to work like nothing happened. People who work at or frequently visit Disney, what do you know that would ruin the magic? I have been stranded on a stopped rocket inside Space Mountain at Disneyland. It took about 15 minutes to get the ride moving again. Anyway, we ended up riding it with the lights on. And it's a surprisingly slow, tame roller coaster. There are fans blowing air in your face to give it the illusion of speed. Yeah, it's one of the slowest coasters at any major park. Frankly, it's super impressive how they make it feel fast. It's also heavily air conditioned so that the wind feels faster. The fast and thumping music also adds to the feeling. When you walk through areas of Magic Kingdom and you smell freshly baked cookies in a certain area, it's not actual cookies from one of the stores. They secretly spray cookie smell to add to the effect. I worked in broadcast services in Anaheim. There is not a single place in the park, except for bathrooms, and in some cast member areas, where you cannot be seen on CCTV. That sounds incredibly expensive. I don't think this ruins anything, but it always makes me laugh. The night show at Hollywood Studios is called Phantasmic, and it ends with a bunch of characters going by on Steamboat Willie. Then they all go inside and fireworks sparks stream down the side of the boat. Well, Ariel has a tail and can't walk, so she has to stay outside on her pedestal at the back of the boat. So Prince Eric wraps a fireproof blanket around her before going in. It's dark on that part of the boat when it happens, but if you watch for it you can definitely see it. Hey, this is one I actually knew. When you stay at a resort, Disney opens a file for you. They know where you eat, what rides you've been on, and how many times you've complained to a manager or guest services. That's why I think it hilarious when people online tell others online that they can get things for free if they complain. Sure, you might get something at first, but Big Brother Disney is keeping tabs on you. Whenever we have difficult guests, the first thing my manager does is pull up their file, and if you've been complaining and getting free things at every restaurant, ride, and hotel you've been to, chances are, your luck is about to run out, and it doesn't go away after you leave. It stays there, till the next time you come back. Think of it as your Disney permanent record. Also, the Disney Secret Security. They look just like a regular tourist, but their job is to walk around and watch for people doing things they're not supposed to be doing. Lots of visitors will try to spread the ashes of loved ones on theme park rides. Walt Disney World has 2 abandoned parks. 1, River Country was a water park. Before it closed, an 11-year-old visitor died after coming into contact with brain-eating amoeba at the park. Costumed characters are not allowed to take off their costume in public. The average temperature high in Orlando in summer is around 91. In 2004, a cast member dressed up as Pluto was killed after a parade float ran over him. I went to a conference for a small organization I'm in which a previous Disney CEO spoke at. He talked about how they focused on Disney princesses so they could sell lots of accessories to girls and how little girls are much better to sell to than boys because boys are satisfied playing with sticks on the ground while little girls want more. I'm a cast member at Disneyland California. The one thing that ruins the magic is all the people who complain to get free things. I work at guest relations and all the time people complain about trivial things to try and get fast passes or other free things. My girlfriend is an avid Disney fan and goes all the time. Her favorite thing to point out is how often they reuse old animatronics. For example, in Disneyland California there used to be an old attraction called America Sings where animals would sing to an audience. When the ride closed, some of the geese in the attraction were stripped and used in the queue for Star Tours as droids. A lot of others ended up going to Splash Mountain. Rumor has it they use the old Big Al animatronic from the Country Bears for Oogie Boogie in the holiday overlay of the Haunted Mansion. They also reuse molds of animatronics, so there are many in Spaceship Earth, Carousel of Progress and Haunted Mansion in Orlando who share faces with the president in the Hall of Presidents. Dude, Big Al was creepy and when I was a kid, especially with his blood song. I build concerts, did Disney on Ice a number of times. Goofy once told me about his breakfast that morning. Wheaties with beer, no milk. It was a great performance that day. The Mad Lad. I rode on Space Mountain when they had all the lights on. It makes the whole thing really sketchy. The whole coaster area of the building was lit up with LED fluorescent bulbs or something, and you could see everything. Stuff is a lot closer to your head than you think it is, and they use the dark to hide a lot of the inner workings instead of spending money on making it all match the theme of the ride. Overall, a really weird experience. When I went on Space Mountain, I was so paranoid of getting my head hit or something. That was the only ride I felt that way. Guess it makes sense now. I saw some YouTube video of a Disney princess that worked at the park. She had literal stalkers that would show up constantly and talk to her. They would even get angry at the replacement if the person the stalker was stalking had to have their normal shift off. Disney wouldn't do anything until the stalker did something physical or lewd. A 40-year-old man coming to visit a specific 20-year-old girl that had to interact with the man with a smile day after day wasn't creepy enough for Disney. That's scary. I know that the different Peter Pan actors have been nicknamed by fans, and they will visit their specific favia rights. Also, one set of Peter Pan and Wendy actors got married. I worked as a chef at Disneyland. Most of the food at the most expensive parts of Disneyland, the winery, Blue Bayou, use canned and over-processed ingredients. Any dietary restrictions, you are most likely getting food from a microwave. Despite having some of the most skilled chefs on the planet, they cut corners in every way. My sister got to eat at Cinderella's castle 2 years ago. She said the food was like overpriced Applebee's quality, complete waste of money. The go away green paint they use, that you don't notice, because you're not supposed to. It's on everything they don't want you to pay attention to. Oh, just remembered another one. If you forget your name tag, you wear a spare from the manger's office. Most of the spares say Chris from Orlando, because that's a unisex name. But a lot of cast members keep the spare and wear it when they are not feeling magical so they can't get complaints. I did actually know one Chris from Orlando who was a cast member, and it sucked for him because he never got any cast compliments. Guest relations always figured it was a fake name. Or people just borrow the name of someone who is getting off when they are starting their shift. I was once Justin. I'm female, so it was fun making up stories to guests about it. My parents liked boys' names for girls, or it's pronounced Justine. It was an unentertaining shift. Daughter-in-law worked at WDW. Some days her only job was to organize the strollers outside of a theater. As one group left a show and took theirs, she'd push the next set of strollers forward. Otherwise you'd have the 3rd and 4th show guest strollers blocking the paths. She was constantly being yelled for having moved them. One lady said her purse was in the stroller with their passports and airline tickets. Once they found a sleeping toddler. In Magic Kingdom at WDW, there is a vacuum system that literally sucks away trash to a central location backstage behind Frontierland. The floors of that central location have to be specially treated because so many people pour their sodas in the trash. If it wasn't, the acidity of the soda would literally eat away at the concrete floor. The vacuum system also makes the underground tunnel smell. I worked in Frontierland. When I was first learning my way around the tunnels, I used the smell of garbage as my landmark of where to turn. I had a teacher who was a cast member at Disney, said that every time he smells trash, he thinks of his time there because the crew member lounge in his area was right next to the dumpsters. My dad used to date this absolutely gorgeous little Armenian woman. She could have been a model, but she was in the Mickey Minnie Mouse costume. They need someone small for that costume. So next time you're taking a picture next to Mickey, just know that the person inside could be anyone from a Danny DeVito lookalike to a supermodel-esque woman. Her ex-husband was actually just as small and he played Mickey and Minnie too. I am now never going to be able to unsee Danny DeVito as Mickey and Minnie Mouse. A small part of me is going to forever believe that it's his side gig. My dad actually opened Splash Mountain at Florida. He used to be a very well-known weatherman. People still come up to him all the time who recognize him, so we go frequently cause they always send us stuff. We were one of the test families for the magic bands and all sorts of stuff. But the one thing I think of when people ask this is all the illusions they use. Many rides are a lot slower than they seem. Many smells and pumped into the parks, and if you walk through any of the parks without the music playing, it loses 75% of the feeling. The sword in the stone is brought up by a button on certain cameras that the photographers that work at Disney. You have to have one of them press the button on, else it is stuck. Your hands don't have to be on it. I don't know if this counts, but this was a while ago so it may not be accurate and I don't visit it regularly, but here goes. I was having dinner in the castle with the princesses because of my sister and our table was by a wall. I accidentally hit the wall and it looked like one of those big ones about 30 centimeters across, 1 foot, and it looked like plastic and felt like it, and that was the same type of brick as the outside ones. So from that, it seems that the castle is not made of traditional castle stuff. When their plants don't match their aesthetic standards, that is, they are sick, too big small, or not in bloom, they are switched with a full-grown replacement. The trees on Main Street are regularly swapped out so that they maintain the proper height to achieve the forced perspective. At the end of each season, thousands of flowers in the Mickey Mouse floral display at the entrance are removed and replaced so it is always in bloom. All these rotations are done in one night to not affect visitor experience. Not sure if it's only at Disney stores but at the parks as well, but when the people tell you to have a Disney day they are basically telling you to go FCK yourself. I don't know whether this will ruin anything, it's just a fun fact. Walt Disney was a chain smoker and constantly had a cigarette in his hand. Consequently, a majority of the photographs taken of him show him holding a cigarette. In today's modern society, it is no longer socially appropriate to be a chain smoker, so the Disney company has airbrushed the cigarettes out of all the old photos of Walt that they use for publicity. This leaves Walt holding his hand in a very strange position, with two fingers extended, where there used to be a cigarette between them. The Disney company's official explanation for this is that Walt had a very unique hand gesture, that every time he pointed, he did so with two fingers. In order to perpetrate this lie on the public, all Disney employees, in the parks, the hotels, the Disney stores in malls, everywhere, are required to point with two fingers, and are told, this is the Disney way, and the whole reason is to make the public comfortable with seeing that gesture, so that Walt doesn't look weird in all those old pictures where the cigarettes have been erased. Try it. The next time you're around a Disney employee, ask for directions, or ask where something is. I guarantee you they will point with two fingers. Yeah, I wouldn't say this ruins anything. That's just a really cool tidbit. Disney built the railroad tracks in Anaheim elevated as a way to block the horizon. This allowed for an immersive experience as to not be able to see outside of the park. I used to work at both Disneyland and World. I think the worst part is how toxic the mentality they require is. I knew several people who had trouble separating themselves from the I have to make everyone happy constantly mindset when they left work. One of them even was hospitalized after a suicide attempt that he said was because he felt like his life was fake when he left work and that it made him a total pushover. Disney definitely doesn't want you to feel this way, but there is something about the people they hire who have constant over-the-top personalities that becomes too much. As a side effect of it, I felt sometimes like I was going to get in trouble if I didn't constantly smile or feel 100%, even outside work. It definitely isn't a place that embraces reality, but for what they do there that only makes sense. People don't want to pay thousands of dollars to go on vacation and see people feeling crappy. Not Disney, Universal, but it applies to Disney as well. A lot of sets are just a shell. Seems pretty obvious, but a guest seemed really upset when I answered his question about the Harry Potter train just going through our back of house. There's nothing interesting on the other side, just offices and wardrobe. The whole center of Universal with the offices and soundstage looking buildings is still really disorienting for me. I apparently spent too much time as a guest with that train being the way between parks to ever incorporate the reality of the layout into my worldview. I've only been to Disneyland once when I was little enough for it to be magical, but not so little that I can't ride some of the rides. But the thing that stood out the most for me was seeing stormtroopers going into a break room. I really wanted to get a picture with one and thankfully the guy at the end was nice. But seeing them go into a break room was weird. I realized that there were people too. The Haunted Mansion is just a facade. The ride itself is in a giant nondescript warehouse. You enter through an elevator concealed in the stretching entryway, which is actually the world's largest elevator by capacity. In Disneyland, the actual warehouse is outside the park proper, hidden by a berm and sightlines for space reasons. Wow, I always thought the stretching room was just the ceiling being lifted. That's why they always tell you to stay away from the walls. That's pretty cool. Apparently all the skeletons in the Pirates of the Caribbean ride were once real human skeletons, because Disney himself wanted them to look more realistic. But now we're better at making realistic stuff like that, so they took out all the real ones and replaced them with fake ones. Apparently there's a skull in there that's still real though. If anyone wants to do more research on where that is in the ride or has pictures of it, that would be cool. I believe it's the one embedded in a headboard. And yeah, at the time real skeletons were way cheaper than realistic fakes. The Disney World one only ever had fakes, I'm pretty sure. I worked at SeaWorld, not Disney, but there are vending machines right on the other side of those partitions that separate the guest area and employee area that have soda in cans for 50 cents and bottles for 75. Just be quick and you'll be fine, and if someone notices you, just act like you didn't see the employees only sign. We will believe you. Most employees, they have a rather low opinion on the intelligence of tourists. I think there are a lot of parks that have a setup like this for vending machines. You just have to know where they are. If an employee is near, maybe you could give them money and ask them nicely to go get you a drink. I understand if someone dies, they'll just sit there and talk to them as if they were just hurt so as to not alarm other guests. A friend of mine just got married and his wife wanted to give up her career at a law firm to go work at Disney. Sounded like she was going to get this big important position, but it was entry level. So she got there, they have public housing, and get paid minimum wage, and she was forced to do menial park labor. She came back pretty fast. A ride constantly breaking down during the day. The one day I was in Magic Kingdom, I tried going on Pirates of the Caribbean 3 times. First time, it was through Fastpass. Ride breaks down, so my friends and I were allowed to use it on any other ride in the park. Went on Space Mountain, so it was worth it. Second time, it was a 40 minutes wait, so my friends and I decided to wait it out. 30 minutes in, we hear that the ride broke down again. Third time, at like 10 PM after I go on Splash Mountain. 20 minutes wait, so I figured what the heck. Breaks down just as soon as I make it to the front of the line. I used to work at Splash. It breaks down all the time, especially in summer. My dad used to work there. It turns out a child had brought his pet mouse, named Mickey, and it escaped and died in the log ride. Soon after, it was closed due to a red color and putrid scent in the water, and had to be shut down and cleaned. Crowds, just crowds. The ride lines are always long, it's impossible to walk around with thousands of people around you, and it ruins the experience. If you want to go to Disneyland World, go on a school or work day, because nobody's usually there. A lot of people go to Epcot for the Drink Around the World challenge. Basically they drink the national cocktail of every country pavilion, and almost everyone who take up this challenge end wasted and throwing up in the restroom at the time the night show starts. So yeah, if your kid has an urge at night in Epcot, go behind a tree. It's safer and probably cleaner than whatever is left of the restroom at that hour. My girlfriend worked in recreation over there as a lifeguard. The pools are cleaned daily, which is great. However, in summer the pools would close up to 6 times a day for unscheduled maintenance or something similar. This usually meant that someone had had an accident in the pool and the manager needed to get it out. The kids' water area closed down a lot for this too. The water then needs retesting for safety and it can take a long time. One particular day they had 4 back-to-back, 2 from same kid, followed by a thunderstorm. People were not happy, but trust me, if it's closed, you really don't want to go in. If you've been to Disneyland in the last few years and rode Big Thunder Mountain Railroad, there is a certain part of the ride where if you look in the right direction you could see them building Galaxy's Edge. My friend who was an AP holder pointed it out on our trip together in 2017. Disney's Tower of Terror in California, if I recall correctly, has its specific height because if it were 1 foot higher it'd need a bright red beacon to warn aircraft. The water on the safari cruise isn't even waist deep, it's dyed to seem deeper. A Magic Kingdom in California is on the 1st floor. The ground floor is an elaborate network of tunnels so you don't see too many maintenance crews or characters in the wrong area. This one's pretty well known these days, but still, the people in costumes around the park are fricking each other. Cinderella is blowing Aladdin, Mickey Mouse is banging one of the chipmunks, Ariel is taking it from Frozone and Woody. I can't express how surprisingly common it is for those actors to just bang it out behind the scenes in between their shifts. My great-grandfather is an Imagineer and took us under Disney World one visit, and we could legitimately hear the clapping echoing through one of the tunnels. He said it's not encouraged there by any means, but hardly anyone does anything because it's so common and apparently keeps morale up. Apparently standing around in a sweltering goofy costume all day is worth it if you get to bang Snow White later. On the bright side, we passed a free condom dispenser inside one of the changing rooms. At least Disney sorta cares. Worked all over WDW in Orlando. There are some locations where you'll get written up if a manager sees you and you're not smiling. Got off 10-hour shifts and was frozen in a smile until after a shower and face massage. If you're an intern, they charge you rent for staying on the property you practically have to stay in. It's absurd amounts for what you're given. Oftentimes I'd work 70 hours weeks and take home about $1,200 a month. That ruins crap. How many jars of human ash have been spread throughout the park? They try to keep it clean, but sometimes it's pretty apparent, especially when you know the difference between dust and ash. You're tracked through the RFID chip in your magic band, park ticket, or cast member ID. At any given point, if they have to find you, they can. I worked as an artist animator for Disney Imagineering for 3 years. Fun job. Learned a lot both good and bad about the entertainment biz. Incredible amounts of backstabbing. Talented artists and gobsmacking amounts of cash just pee away. Wanna ruin the magic work for Disney for an extended period of time. We had a saying for people who worked for them for ages and were still gung-ho and excited about it. They got a lot of pixie dust in their veins. Theme park employees. What are some cool secrets about your workplace? Some Cedar Point secrets. Some of these are from friends who have worked around the park. You probably already knew this, but that $3.50 bottle of soda is $1 2 steps behind an employee gate. Same goes for most of the food in the cafeteria. On most of the larger attractions and rides, we have a system of signals and gestures to make fun of you behind your back. It keeps the long, repetitive and hot day somewhat interesting. Never, ever, ever will we tell you what is wrong with a ride. Also, we'll never tell you when it's going to be up. The only differentiation we can make is if we're told it's going to be a multiple hour fix. At that point, we anticipate a lengthy delay. Yup, we usually know what is wrong and how long it's going to take. Employee dorms could probably double for a gay male brothel. Many times we're instructed to take cars off of a coaster simply because of attendance numbers. They don't tell us that officially. Simply no need to have 3/3 cars on the track when the park is at 50% capacity. Yep, that makes lines longer. Sorry, disaster transport $1 3D glasses are a ripoff considering how short the ride is. But you already knew that. It's fun to watch you flash the ride cameras. We block the pictures on the monitors but can still see them behind the counter. We can also unblock them. All I can think of. Not really theme park, but I used to work at Chuck E. Cheese. Secret. Pretty much everyone there hates kids with an undying fury. One time, a friend of mine started his first day and we had him in the Chuck E costume and a kid came up and punched him in the balls. Without flinching, my friend decked the little crap right in the face. His parents weren't around so we rushed my friend to the back and told the parents the kid fell. Needless to say, my friend was fired that same day. Your friend is a hero. It is no longer available, but SeaWorld used to serve free beer. As a resident of San Diego, I would buy an annual pass for $74, drive to SeaWorld a few times a week after work, drink a few free beers, and go home. Sadly, it ended in 2009. But boy howdy was it great while it lasted. I'm glad someone had sense and did this also. It's really hard to sign the autographs in some of the costumes. In some of the characters you look through the mouth, but have to act like you're looking with the eyes of the character, which means most of their head is above your own. The heads can be really frickin' heavy and stuffy. Lilo was the worst. Plus the water parks are really humid. I almost passed out. CPs at Disney World get free Gatorade. It's the yellow kind. Every Disney prince I met was a gay man. Getting free park entrance was the best part of working there. The pay was the worst. If you see a character rub their eye, it means they need to go backstage because they're going to pass out, feel sick, or are having some sort of costume malfunction. I had to do this twice as Lilo because that costume was frickin' terrible. It's Powerade, not Gatorade, Coke sponsorship. Remember, and it's yellow for a reason. Red looks too much like blood when you puke it up. How many of you have had your plans ruined by some meddling kids and their dog? Only the once, but I had my revenge. Let's just say I know exactly how and why Scrappy Doo never made it to adulthood. I used to work at a place called Camelot Theme Park. It's a modest place in the northwest of England. It was also my first job. I was rides operator, but worked in what they called Section 1, which was the part of the park with all the kids' rides. Years before work there, some employee was apparently killed after being hit by a roller coaster during safety checks, but I'm not sure how much of that is myth. Anyway, relating to the how things work bit in this question, there was a ride there that had been around since it opened in the mid-80s known as the Caterpillar Apple Ride. The cart train was modeled on a giant caterpillar and it went through a big red apple halfway around the track. It was aimed at toddlers and small kids really, but by god it was the most primitive roller coaster I've ever seen. Apart from the chain that pulled it up to the top of the main dip, it ran completely on gravity, and to start the ride you released the brakes, which were clamps on the tracks, not the cart itself, and literally had to push it out of the station. If you didn't push it hard enough it would slow down and stop before the foot of the hill and you'd have to call maintenance to get the stranded people out. My first day operating the ride, the brakes were faulty. It was only meant to go round the track twice. I ended up making it go round 15 times. I went once for about 5 minutes. My mum thought it was really chavvy there. I was so pee at her, comma. Here are some secrets from the wizarding world of Harry Potter. The costumes worn by the team members were designed by Potter costume designer Janie Tamime. Some of the Hogwarts costumes worn by TMs working Harry Potter and the Forbidden Journey were actually used in the films and worn by extras. TMs working Harry Potter and the Forbidden Journey are sorted into houses based on their height. Universal operations, merchandise and food service TMs may usually wear their work wardrobe home. However, the Wizarding World wardrobe items are the only wardrobe items that these TMs may not take home. TMs caught doing so will be immediately terminated and may face criminal charges for theft and IP theft if they do so. After the Three Broomsticks restaurant was designed, the real film set was altered to more closely resemble the theme park restaurant. The male dress robes seen in the Gladback's Wizarding Wear storefront are the same ones worn by Daniel Radcliffe in Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire. The female dress robes are an exact replica of the ones worn by Emma Watson in the same film. The TMs who work in that area are encouraged to act in character, but they may not say anything that would add to the Harry Potter story. For example, they may not say they know Harry, Dumbledore, or any of the characters, or say what those characters may or may not like or do. For example, if you see a little girl with a stuffed cat, you can say I like your kitty. I have a kitty like that at home. You may not say oh, I'll bet Hermione would like your kitty. I didn't work at a theme park but my high school English teacher worked for Disneyland while he was in college and told us stories a lot. He said Chip and Dale were the most disgusting guys ever and would have contests to see who could grope the most MILFs in a day. My buddy got thrown out of Disneyland for punching Dale after he groped his wife. At WDW's Magic Kingdom, the food served in the employee cafeteria, or mousecateria, is not the same food served to the guests. It's run by Aramark Food Services and is much worse. There's a Subway restaurant down there they also run, but they don't participate in any national Subway promotions. $5 footlongs? Nope. Still, it's cheaper than the food served topside. And if you're caught taking food from the cafeteria to the top, especially if you're buying it for visiting family or friends who are playing in the park, you can be fired. Spent a summer working games at Hershey Park. Not the most exciting things to be learned, but here we go. All of the popular games have cameras installed in them. That means ring toss. Ring toss is for cameras. It's because if the attendant gets distracted and a ring lands on the outer two ring of bottles, you have to call it in. People notoriously have little kids lean over and just place it and try and guilt the attendant into giving away big butt bears. When you play Wacky Winding Wires, by July, all of the new employees can beat that game. Does not mean we will bend the rules if we hear that annoying buzzer, but it also doesn't mean we can't tell you which game station has a smaller ring or larger ring. It can make a large difference. Only one place in the entire park sells beer and that is the Minetown Cafe right by the Great Bear. Check out the smoothie place in the food court area. They are amazing and vastly underrated. Every year, 1% of all profits from Hershey Park and Hershey's chocolate goes to the Milton Hershey School, which was originally a school for orphans, but will now also help kids whose parents can't afford to send them to school. This means the school will never go bankrupt. Ever. That school is worth over $1 billion. If you live somewhere close to Hershey Park, make friends with the employees. They get 2 free tickets per paycheck, 15% off everything in the park, and 25% off everything in Chocolate World. This means make friends with an employee, give them your money and make them buy your chocolate for you. Employees can buy the prizes in the game stalls. I know you're thinking who'd buy a crappy butt dolphin that costs less than a nickel to make, but we love giant butt teddy bears as big as them and they make great birthday gifts. Does not mean we can buy them for guests. This can get us fired. If you are thirsty but also a cheapskate, food vendors can give out free cups of water. Employees have their own cafe outside the park, and it's got all the foods we serve in park, minus the delicious smoothies GRR, at like 75% off. Those $8 burgers are only $2 and are made to order, unlike the generic cheeseburger you get in park. We also had a weekly meals such as Salisbury steak, breakfast for lunch, etc. All I got for now. If I think of some later, I'll add them. Feel free to ask about my time there. I worked for a long time at Santa's Village in Sky Forest, California. It's closed now, but it was pretty famous to Southern Californians at the time. There was a dead rat in the nacho machine, under the metal slope that holds the chips, at the Pixie Pantry for at least a year. We had dead rats pretty much everywhere, just out of sight. The deep fryer oil in the Pixie Pantry was never changed. The insects were just scooped out with a mesh spoon. All the burgers were cooked in the morning and kept in a bucket of water until someone ordered one. Most of the order fresh food vendors were clean enough. Santa Claus was a huge chain smoker. He smelled horrible. The B monorail was known to catch on fire. The bobsled coaster derailed at least once, sending the riders to the hospital. We had a similar accident with the horse-drawn carriage. I don't think any ride operators were actually trained for emergencies. Kids puke a lot. You probably already knew that. Grew up in San Bernardino and the commercials for the place made it seem like a junior Disneyland. Finally went there when I was 10 or so and was immensely disappointed. I worked last summer for Valley Fair, a park in Minnesota owned by the people who own Cedar Fair. These aren't as cool as the Disney World ones, but I have a few. Behind the Renegade coaster is an original Edsel Ranger sitting on a grassy hill. I don't know what it's for and no one there I asked seems to know either. Buy a season pass. As of last year, parking is included, and they cost $60 at the beginning of the season. Regular admission is $48 and parking is $10. Our lifeguards are completely incompetent. They get audited randomly throughout the season, where the company stages an emergency and the guards have to save someone. Almost all of them fail and have to go through training again. People lose a ton of money on rides. I worked in park services, park cleanup, and once found $28 in a day just in bills dropped from a roller coaster. I worked in the games department for 2 summers. Best summers of my life. Games are not rigged, they just require a lot of luck as the odds are against you. One time an NBA player came to play the 3-point challenge. He won. The auditions for characters are tough. To be a face character, they line you up and analyze your bone structure before they do anything else. If your figure, height and bone structure aren't right, you don't even get to go any further in the audition. It's fun though. 3 plus the underground passages in the main park, I'm sure you know what I'm talking about, are pretty awesome, but can be creepy. They aren't all bright and colorful. It's a tunnel system, not an attraction. My childhood nearly fell to pieces when I saw a bench with my favorite characters' heads all lined up in a row on it. I went to school with a girl named Jasmine who looked freakishly like Princess Jasmine. Then she grew up, became a dancer singer, and performed as Princess Jasmine at Tokyo Disney. Being from Orlando, I have worked all the theme parks. Since this thread is overwhelmed with Disney facts, I will instead tell you something about my employment with Wet n Wild. If an attractive, large busted woman was at the top of the slide, the guy working at the bottom of the ride would give the secret boob signal for the lifeguard up top. This was code for the lifeguard to send her down the slide with her hands interlocked behind her head instead of her arms folded across her chest. If a person's arms are folded across the chest, this method prevents wardrobe malfunctions, which is a reason why it is the policy to do so. Because when the hands are interlocked behind the head, it prevents the said female from covering her escaping breasts. It goes without saying that this led to optimal boobage for the lifeguard waiting below. Oh, to reminisce on those scenes. Me gawking at those helpless girls through my mirrored sunglasses as they failed to realize that their bosom was exposed for all to see. In retrospect, this may have been an inappropriate use of power. It is also worth noting that when purchasing sunglasses for lifeguarding, the ideal pair will have dark lenses, thus allowing your eyes to wander upon the exposed breasts completely unnoticed. This was another very well-known fact on the job. And it's too late, I've already seen it all. At my park, we spared no expense. We told the public that we breed all the dinosaurs on our island, but that just isn't true. When you are working with such volatile things as extinct animals, the yield isn't 100%, so we actually do most of our breeding and research on a second island a few miles away. You know all your crap that you lose at Walt Disney World? Well, after 90 days of being unclaimed, it gets shipped to a cast-only shopping area in the back of Magic Kingdom parking lot, where it is sold to us lowly cast members for a huge discount. Yay cheap cameras and phones and such. However, when I was working attractions, a lot of the best lost stuff never even made it to Lost and Found. Co-workers would take the items. I know a few that had 5-6 digital cameras and were collecting them. I never understood it. Water is by law free if you go up to any food stand and ask for it. But if you ask for magic water, I guarantee that 9 times out of 10 you'll get a free cup of Sprite. Magic water sounds like a code name for some vodka laced with H or something. I work for Worlds of Fun out in Kansas City for about 7 years. I have a few things to add, but the other Cedar Fair parks seem to have it on the money. These are mostly game related things since that was my department. Despite what you may choose to believe, in games we actually want you to win. How many times you win now, that's debatable. A side point to the games, they are all winnable. Some of them are just really hard. If you have a little kid and are generally pretty nice to the employee in the game and your kid doesn't win, most of us will generally be really nice and let them try again for free or give them some smaller plush for trying. No, we cannot sell giant plush to you, stop asking. Yes, we really do have cameras in all the games and they do work. Seriously, we cannot sell crap to you or give you something for free. 3-point challenge at any Cedar Fair park is completely winnable. I've seen it done. Management, unless you're in a leadership position, will hate you. It's just a fact you have to face. It is actually ridiculously hard to fire bad employees. I have no idea why, but it took us 3 months to fire someone who was tardy literally every single day, by at least an hour, and sometimes never showed up for a shift. Red means stop. Red tags are jail bait. Red tag is any employee between 15 or 14 years old. Eat before you get there. The food is crap and where it's made is worse. You can also leave and come back and just pay for parking again. It's way better than getting terrible overpriced food. The Prowler, Mamba, and Monsoon are the best rides in the park, and the only ones that don't break down at the drop of a dime. If you have a friend that works at the park and is willing to do so, have them use your vehicle information for an additional employee parking pass. You get an extra for free. This plus a season pass equals extra savings. I hate to be the one to spoil it for everyone, but the characters that you see walking around are actually just people in costumes. Hopefully I didn't shatter too many childhood dreams. It's mostly pee. The back. The park guests can't see of the Legoland Billund Castle, Borgen, is a flat, sky blue brick wall. Sorry, that wasn't cool. I don't work anywhere cool like Disneyland or Cedar Point, but I did work at a small, local amusement park. The big secret here is that some of these rides are more dangerous than they look, and all of them are staffed by minimum wage high school or college students. It's a winning combination. Also, the park has paid people to keep quiet about injuries. I'm unsure if that's common practice in the amusement world. I used to work at a theme park called Santa's Village about 10 years ago. My first day they quickly certified me to run the big roller coaster they had. I had no idea what I was doing. So I'm standing there watching the cars go around and I noticed a huge beam that holds the coaster up is snapped in half. It was attached to the ground and attached to the track, but was snapped in half and the part hanging from the track was swinging in the wind and pulling the track down with it. The maintenance guys quickly welded it back together and reopened the ride. Frick that. I also drove this fire truck thing where a miniature house would catch on fire and the fire truck would drive to it and the kids would use hoses to put it out. Well, one day while driving it the fricking truck overheated and had caught on fire. The whole place was falling apart and nobody seemed to give a crap. Thank God that death trap of an amusement park went bankrupt. There are several fences on the sides of buildings at Cedar Point. Usually inside of these fenced areas is a vending machine selling soda and water for $1.25, not for $6. A protein spill means someone puked. Also, hidden passages everywhere. I kid you not. I think I'd rather clean up puke than protein if you know what I mean. I know a Thorpe Park in England that the manager has a special relationship with the roller coaster fan club and every time a new roller coaster is opened the entire club gets invited to the park which then stays open 2 hours later just for them. On just that ride. The rest of the park is shut down and everyone else is kicked out but that one ride is kept open. I used to be a vet tech for Jurassic Park Triceratops Encounter at IOA. This used to be one of the main attractions in Jurassic Park. It was shut down for a while and I just saw they reopened it. Jurassic Park being my still favorite franchises, I try to add my own flair and modifying my uniform to accommodate a Triceratops belt buckle. That was a big no number. Before I actually started to work with the robot. We had to go to Dino classes and learn all these bogus facts that Universal wanted you to answer if guests had questions. One question, I swear, was, how big is a T-Rex testicle? Answer, about the size of a basketball. The one the vet tech is holding controls the different modes of the dinosaur as well as the sneeze function. There are mats that detect movement underfoot which if accidentally stepped on immediately freezes the dinosaur. Just in case someone tries to hop the gate. My favorite was there is a small button behind the frill of the Triceratops that once pushed sets the dino to rage mode. We were forbidden to push it with threats of termination if we did so. I would push it all the time and ad lib. I got a lot more. It was about 9 years. Everything ran on Windows 98 which caused everything to break down all the time. My spelling is bad and I'm on an iPhone so suck it grammar Nazis. Custodians in the park. They are the guys girls who walk around in all white with little hip packs with paper towels and stuff and then carry these little cards. I can't remember what they are called but I remember the year I was there they had Pinocchio on them. Anyways, they're cards that if your child has an accident, throws up, or does one of those things that would honestly just ruin the frick out of their day, a custodian can go with you into any Disneyland store, turn their card into a supervisor at that store, and give you new clothes for them. For free. I worked there 1.5 years and only ever used mine once. They are rare and almost nobody remembers they have them. It's not just for kids either. Say you throw up on your selfie or GF gets her period early or something. Boom, new crap so you don't have to go home in tears of embarrassment. So next time you see someone have a crappy day at Disneyland, refer them to a custodian and it might get less crappy real fast. Not an employee, but apparently theme parks take sneaking in pretty seriously. I sat drunkenly in interrogation for over an hour tonight and had to bail my friend out of jail because he told the ladder cop to frick off. You fat bee. We went in under a fence and got snagged pretty quickly. Overall, worth the 4th degree misdemeanor. Depends on the theme park. I broke into our local historical park and everything went better than expected. Not sure if it's a secret, but Disney World has an entire underground system of accessible walking passages. You can crawl down one manhole in Frontierland and pop up in Tomorrowland, but it's really like a bunch of cement hallways and doors. Universal Islands of Adventure. Cats everywhere. Seriously, if you work at IOA and walk through the park at nighttime, don't stop. They're watching you. Hunting. Disneyland and DCA have about 200 feral cats that roam the parks at night. Instead of trying to capture and move them, they just have a neuter and release policy. Any kittens are given to loving homes. On top of that, there are 5 feeding stations hidden throughout the parks. It's a great way of keeping the park's rodent population down apparently. Here are some better Cedar Point secrets. Most employees who used to work on rides have taken excess ride parts that were never installed. I have a limit switch and some other minor items. Some of my friends have old seatbelts and proxies. Yet, we can never tell you what is wrong with the ride, or how long it's going to be down, but we almost always know exactly what's wrong and about how long it's going to take. No, we usually don't have stupid hand gestures for crap behind your back. Well, maybe some rides do, but none of the 8 rides I worked on did. Dragster is running super slow this year because there is no multi-move due to a train throwing off some procs when running like that. If people actually know what this means, I'll explain more. The red phone on the rides are not the bad phones that everyone thinks they are. They are the phones used for communication on the ride. It's the white phone that goes to outside places, maintenance, park operation, etc. Someone mentioned the overpriced soda, but it gets worse. I'm pretty sure Cedar Point gets all the soda for free from Pepsi since Pepsi likes advertising in the park. Beach Boys plays in the queue lines because people were trying to appease Don Kinzel, Cedar Fair CEO. If you are in butthole to a ride operator, you will probably be stapled to your seat during the ride. The employee quality may have seemed to go down there. That's because everyone that was well trained on the rides left because of how terrible they treat their employees and how much they overwork them. No overtime. Ohio seasonal employment exemption written for amusement parks that Cedar Point specifically lobbied for. People have crazy stories about bad stuff happening in the park, but Cedar Point is one of the safest parks in the world by far. Like, it's not even a question if you see what goes down at other parks. One of the most dangerous rides in the park is Skyride. Yeah, the slowly floating cabins. People at the other end have to slow and stop them manually. At full capacity, they are coming in every 7 seconds. Cedar Point is the only park left with a ride like this. Possibly because they have never had a serious accident on it. There are lots more, but those are some of the basics. I worked at Michigan's Adventure, owned by Cedar Point, for a while. Not too much that hasn't already been said, but I do know that most people running the rides at that park are hungover or maybe drunk. We only got 3 call-ins before we were fired, and I was told that even if I threw up on a guest, I would not get to go home. I knew of a guy who took all the safety clips off the children's rides, the buckles that require a key to open so that the kids don't open them themselves on the ride. Riding a water ride? Don't. You don't even want to know what is in that water. AFR in a water park means accidental fecal release, and if you see lifeguards keeping you out of a pool, don't go back in, because that's what just happened, and it happens way more often than you think. Nothing is safe. Please don't ask what's wrong with the ride if it's down. We can't tell you, because if we did, you wouldn't actually know what was happening, and would freak out. Just because the safety harness is malfunctioning doesn't mean a few good hits from a maintenance guy won't make it work again soon. I also worked at Disney, and that's been covered extensively. I worked the safari ride, if anyone is interested. Disney theme park characters. Have there been situations where you had to break character? What was the reason? Consequences? I chaperoned a gentleman with special needs to Disneyland as part of a group tour. When our group of special needs individuals met the characters, they were all absolutely incredible with our people. Minnie flirted with my friend I took. Narita flirted with me. But the best of all was Cruella de Vil. Normally she insults whoever she takes pictures with. With us she managed to stay in character but not say anything actually mean. She said to one guy with a cane, "Ah, I like your cane. You can use it to beat little ones out of your way." On a Disney cruise I met a guy who looked exactly like Peter Pan. When we asked him he said nope, Peter Pan has brown eyes, or something like that. The next day when we went to get a picture with Peter he got super close and whispered, "See, Peter has brown eyes." Hands down best Disney employee I've ever met. He was also Pluto. The guy referencing he knows Peter Pan's eye color should be a dead giveaway. Ex-cast member here. While not a character myself, I did have to work the parade route from time to time, making sure kids didn't dart out in front of floats and such. Friends of characters would often be playful with CMs along the parade route, winking, making silly faces, etc. There was one day where Baloo came up to me mid-dance and proceeded to bow to me. Baloo also happened to be wearing some sort of crown hat thing with a star on the top. Baloo probably wasn't aware of how tall that actually made them. Baloo managed to smack me right in the mouth with that star, cutting it open and giving me a fat lip. Fairly certain I heard Baloo audibly gasp when they stood upright again. Paused to mouth. Immediately stopped dancing. Just stared at me as I bled. They tried to grab my hands and pull me to them, but their handler came and ushered them along. Oops. I watched Jack Sparrow talking to a kid when the kid started puking everywhere. He said too much of the all apple juice. I been there myself, even ran out once. All the while, the kid is just projectile vomiting everywhere. I did the college program at WDW. Never saw character break when I worked audience control for parades. Definitely saw a few fully costumed characters puke in their heads, and Prince Naveen once got heat exhaustion and managed to leave the parade route fully in character. Once the parade was over, we saw him in the back almost completely passed out. Typically the parade will just speed up to double time if a character actor is in distress. I was at Disneyland once and the sheriff of Nottingham was fake menacing a child. He reached out to touch the kid's balloon and for some reason it popped. The character actor was clearly stunned. A new balloon appeared less than 30 seconds later. Saw a recent video on YouTube of a Ray talking to this little girl and her dad had just started filming. Apparently the story the little girl was telling got Ray laughing so hard, she had to turn her face away and eventually got up and ran away because she couldn't stop laughing at whatever the little girl's story was. Super adorable. In the YouTube comments it is explained what she said. My daughter busted me out for giving her too many donuts and told Ray she threw up, then persisted to share how she can potty by herself. Right after sharing secrets of the Force. Complete 180 in the conversation. That's kids for ya. I have a close friend who was Woody for a while at Disneyland. He said that one time the float caught on fire during a show and they had to play it off completely in character. They danced around it and had to quickly get it backstage to deal with the problem. He said they played it off well enough that no one seemed to notice there wasn't any panic. He said he had never seen an instance of anyone breaking character because everyone was very well trained and there's always at least 6 or so cameras that can see you at all times. I also one time offered an unopened water bottle to an employee when it was near 100 degrees and he said if anyone at Disney saw that, he would be fired. They can't take anything from guests. He also mentioned the cameras constantly watching both crew and patrons. One time an acrobat fell off a float, face planted into the ground and knocked herself out. They had to surround her in a circle and dance in sync as they dragged her body away. They played it off well and apparently no one noticed. Worked at the Disney store in late 87 and 88 in Orange County, CA. I think, at the time, it was like one of only a handful of stores open. The back of the store had a big screen, where we constantly played some Disney video. Every once in a while, the biggest, muscular, blackest, gayest dude would come in and kindly request we play anything Pooh related. He'd then proceed to prance around the store. He came in the evenings, towards closing, and sing the Tigger parts of either dialogue or any song. Turns out he was one of the Tiggers at Disneyland. Dude just loved being Tigger. My cousin used to do this when I was a kid. We'd always go try to find her on days we knew she was working. She mostly played Pooh Bear. She would never say out loud hi Nugatuck, but she would get very animated and jump around to give us hugs. Occasionally she'd still say things like I have a rumbly in my tummy. I thought I was the coolest kid cause I knew Pooh Bear. You were correct about that. I wasn't a character but was a cast member. I was walking from backstage into the park. If you've seen the transitions, they are S-shaped to keep people from peeking in. I was pushing a dolly handcart. The ones we used had 2 long supports sticking out from the end. As I was going though Winnie the Pooh was walking in from the other side. I hit him her square in the leg with it. Hearing Winnie the Pooh say frick was a pretty dang funny. A few days ago, me, my sister and her friend went to the new Galaxy's Edge area. My sister's friend was around 6 feet 1 inches and had never seen Star Wars. We were walking around and Chewbacca ran up to her. He was around her height and hugged her. He put his hand above his head, showing they were both tall. She was super embarrassed, and while we were walking away, he did that fist pump thing. Since then we refer to her as Chewbacca's girlfriend. Seriously, the cutest thing ever. What if Chewbacca was played by a female and was super excited to see a fellow tall female? I couldn't even get the zombies at Halloween Horror Nights to break character. Asked one where the restroom was and he flung his arms in the proper direction and grunted. Pretty hilarious. A few years ago at Halloween Horror Nights I had a brief chat with a chainsaw wielding maniac. He screamed. I screamed. I asked if he was having fun and he said heck yeah, I love scaring people, and off he went. WDW character department at Magic Kingdom many years ago. I can't remember breaking character, but I do remember working the restaurant at the Contemporary for dinners. One time we had a Make-A-Wish kid as a guest and they were just the most awesome kid. And it was just heartbreaking to know why they were there. So our lead let us do a group hangout with the kid for something like an hour in costume, playing and running around and having fun. You could never play like that in the parks. You'd start a kid riot. No consequences. We just all hoped we made that little kid happy. I wasn't a character but worked closely with them. As a photographer, Disney performers are trained to never break character for whatever reason. They have ways of signaling their character attendant that they are in distress, and it's generally up to the character attendant to avoid any weird or uncomfortable situations. As far as weird situations, they do get people that stalk them in the park. Like some people get in those lines multiple times to get a photo with a specific performer. The weird side of Disney fanatics are something else. Yep, I heard of one performer who had to get a restraining order after one of her fans got a full back tattoo of her. The tattoo was not of her in character. They do not break character. My best childhood friend is a face character. During the interviews they bring you through a ton of challenging scenarios like kids with lost parents, kids who act mean, etc. If you break character, there are 1000 other people of your exact height and hair color ready to play the character better than you. They even made her do an impression of a Disney character without speaking. She had to be able to just portray the essence of the character, and if they couldn't guess who she wrote down, her interview was over. They are incredibly serious about staying in character. Anytime something bad enough would happen that they should break character, their handler would just guide them away and handle it themselves. Bonus info: she isn't allowed to tell anyone who she plays, except family and friends, or post anything about work on social media for the entirety of her time at Disney, or else she will be fired. I don't work for Disney, but I work for Party Princess Productions that does Disney Day parties on the weekends. I was Darth Vader in Malibu for this kid's day. It was only him, which was rare, but we had fun. We played lightsaber hide and go seek, where when he finds me we duel. I had him practice the Force on me, helping him focus and toss me to the wall. In the middle of all the fun, kid starts coughing. It's subtle at first, then gets worse. Gets to the point he's not breathing and he's not moving. I took off my helmet and was about to perform CPR when the mother came out with his inhaler. She told me he can't play anymore because he has bad asthma and it gets worse the more active he is. I put the helmet back on, played things off. We opened presents together and I left. To this day I hate that mother for watching me play with her kid, knowing his condition and not telling me a word until the poor kid nearly suffocated. I called my boss and told her that I need to know all medical conditions before the party right away from now on. I hope that kid had fun. I still feel horrible for almost killing him from teaching him the ways of the dark side. Wow, Anakin, you've come really far from killing younglings to actually caring for them. I'm proud of you. I wouldn't say break, but I was a lifeguard and I had to ban this kid from going down the water slide. Every single time I told him he had to be feet first, and every time he said okay. But he kept going head first, and it got to the point where the other kids saw him and were copying him. He left and cried to mom and dad, and I explained to mom and dad why. They left and cried to my coordinator, and my cord came back saying that wasn't very magical. I explained after several times of this kid not listening. Other kids were copying him. In any case, I got a stern talk to about being the nice lifeguard who explains why versus the mean lifeguard who just yells orders. Later that day that kid was running across the deck, despite several requests not to, tripped and ate concrete. Don't hate me because I don't feel bad. My neighbor, he died a couple of years ago, so I'm safe in telling this, worked at Disney for years. One day he was stocking shelves in a gift shop and came around the corner and nearly ran into none other than Paul and Linda McCartney. Before he could stop himself, he loudly exclaimed, "Holy crap, it's the McCartneys." He immediately realized how big of a breach of Disney cast member etiquette he had committed and turned 12 shades of red, but before anything bad could happen, Paul and Linda just smiled and laughed and introduced themselves. Apparently they were wonderfully laid back about such things, and quite used to surprised reactions when people recognize them in public. He didn't get into any trouble. His boss saw the whole episode and thought it was hilarious, and I think they both signed a hat or something for him as they were checking out. A face performer broke character for my husband and I. I won't say which park, but we took a trip to Disney about 2 months after our infant son died. He was our first. Our entire nursery was Neverland Peter Pan themed. We always wanted to take him to Disney, have him meet Peter. Well, he couldn't. I got a memorial tattoo, an exact replica of my son's hospital ink handprint, and we got a picture of Peter Pan with the tattoo. We were alone with him and his handler. I tearfully explained the situation before asking him to pose with my arm. He took lots of photos with my tattoo and us, and afterward he hugged me tight, told me he was proud of me, and God bless us, and he was so sorry for our loss. It was amazing, emotional, and I'll never forget that Peter Pan was proud of me for finding the strength to keep on living. It honestly meant the world. I'm so glad he broke character. I'll always treasure those photos and that memory. I once ran up to Donald Duck to give him a hug when I was a kid and he shoved me away pretty hard. Kinda hurt tbh. I would say this was out of character, but Donald is actually kind of a dong. One of the traditions for our college sorority back in the 80s was that the day after initiation, all the new members and their big sisters would go to Disneyland sporting their brand new letters to wear. One of the costume characters in the parade kept throwing gang signs or something at us and we were so confused. Turns out it was one of our sisters who had to work that day. She was trying to do our sorority's hand symbol, but with her hands in oversized furry gloves it didn't show up so well, lol. Reminded me of dabbing Squidward. My wife was goofy for a semester in college. She accidentally ripped the feeding tube out of a Make-A-Wish kid in a wheelchair going in for a hug with poor visibility from the costume. Luckily all wandering costume characters have uniformed handlers to assist, but it's kind of hard to stay in character as Goofy after something like that. She felt terrible and was traumatized for weeks. The kid was fine, from that incident at least. It was a hassle to mitigate, but no medical damage resulted from it. I went once and a man was harassing Cinderella, so she excused herself to the bathroom and ran to a security guard. When I was 6 or so, I went to Disney World with my mom and aunt and cousins. I really wanted Captain Hook's autograph, but per his character, he wasn't supposed to give it. I started crying over it, and my mom went and asked him again nicely, I hope, and told him that I was very upset over it. He signed my book, even though he wasn't supposed to, and I always thought that was neat. So, to Captain Hook from 1989 or so, if you're out there, thanks, and I hope you didn't get in trouble for that. I'm amazed that Hook isn't meant to give out autographs. You'd think out of all the Disney villains, bar Ursula, he'd be the one most into that. They don't break character. If a nuke fell on Disney, they'd be ushering you into the bomb shelters as Aladdin or whatever. Big blast, nerve gas. Show your fast puss. The type of people that play characters are very into it. If something comes up that needs to be addressed, they will handle it in character. You've probably heard stories about characters helping kids find their parents. These days characters always have handlers nearby that have walkie-talkies. I received word on my headset that there was an emergency at home. I immediately ran away from where I was as Donald Duck. Turns out mom called my boss. We weren't allowed to carry cell phones obviously, and told him what was wrong. Obligatory not me, but my best friend is a very popular face character and she's told me some hilarious stories. One time though when she nearly broke character was when she was doing a meet and greet thing. A young autistic boy came in who got very overexcited and yanked her wig off. They put hundreds of bobby pins in your hair to keep them on, so you can imagine the pain, and she had to restrain herself so hard to not scream out. She said the wig was hanging off her head and everyone in the room just froze. The little boy started crying hysterically and had to be rushed from the room. They ended up closing her room up so she could get fixed, but she said it was a pretty crazy moment. Apparently the parents were so embarrassed they didn't even say anything to her and just bolted from the room with the boy. Visitant from last year here. On the Halloween night, I've seen 2 female employees working on the store, not characters though, clearly upset by some kind of superior order. The exact dialogue was, "Yeah, sometimes it gets hard. I know it does, but that attitude was unacceptable." I didn't resist, and I said I guess even in Disney working sometimes sucks. The first girl immediately stood up and smiled as bright as she could. "What do you mean? Working here is awesome every time." I couldn't help but feel that she was agreeing with me, but never breaking the happy land face. Awesome place. Blink if Mickey is behind you with a gun. I'm not a character, but here is my story of it kinda happening to me. The first week of January in 2018 my family went to Disney World, it being everyone's first time except for my wife, and we were in line for the meet and greet where Kilo was on one side and Chewbacca was on the other. When we got to our turn, I let my 2 children who were with me go up first just so they'd be okay with him and so I could get extra pictures on my cell phone. At the time I had a huge mustache that came out right at the corner of my mouth, but the hair could almost fall below my chin. Chewie saw me and got crazy excited, might have been part of the show. He pointed to my mustache and brushed his face, then motioned like he was twisting his mustache hairs also. He really played it up, howling, thumbs up, the whole 9. When we posed for our Disney pic, he actually brushed my mustache with his hand and gave me an awesome hug. That was probably my most teary-eyed happy moment of our trip. Kids didn't understand why I was so joyous. I told them that me and Chewie bonded. I have a story of someone I know who used to do the mascot stuff at Disneyland. Back a couple years ago he had to dress up as Nick from Zootopia for his shift. Now the thing about this costume is that the tail is massive metal spring to help give the illusion that it can move on its own. With that out of the way, one day he was doing his rounds with his partner, Judy, and they had a bit of a troublemaker, 11ish boy, who was being a little rough and pulling on his tail. Keep in mind this tail is pretty heavy at around 40 pounds and is attached to his back pretty firmly, with no real proper field of vision other than the tunnel vision they get, no braking character, and no security nearby to stop to issue. He was in a bit of a pickle. Fortunately for Nick, the father of said troublemaker told him to stop and apologize. He did so with a sour disposition that gave the impression he really didn't care. After said apology, a young girl behind him goes, "Hey Nick," and without missing a beat he does a complete 180 attempting to hit the troublemaker with his tail. He gets purchase and smacks the kid with a good thud and knocks the kid on his butt. While he was giving attention to the little girl his mind was racing that he was gonna get fired for this little stunt. But luckily for him, the dad pulls through by laughing at his kid's misfortune, telling him something along the lines of, "You know you deserved that, right?" He had some other stories of some of the stupid stuff they would do, but for reals, they drill it hard in your head when you go to work them to not break character period. Nick would totally have done that, though. My mom was a costumed character for a couple of years at Disneyland. She was very committed to keeping character, but there was one instance where she broke character. 2 teens jumped her when she was playing Piglet and started beating her. At first she just tried to block and defend herself, but at one point she knocked one of the boys to the ground and pinned him. Considering my mom's only 4 minutes and 10 seconds and was wearing 50 pounds of costume, I consider that fairly impressive. The other kid continued to assault her and I think she may have yelped or cried out because the kid she had pinned hurt her and said, "Oh crap, it's a chick," like, no crap, dumb fuck. But most of the shorter characters are women because, well, they're shorter. Cast members came to help her and the kids were banned from the park. My mom got in a lot of trouble for that too, though, because she broke character. If I recall correctly, she was suspended for a couple days. A friend of the family was in Tokyo Disney during a major earthquake. She was Ariel and she was suspended up in the air. The pulley broke during the quake and she was stuck. She couldn't break character till they all evacuated. Not a character, but a security guard. At Disney, security has a character too. Look intimidating, and we can be. We've got a ton of different passageways and some lovely cells we'll lock you up in if we need to. Well, This one day, there was a domestic case at the parks. The cops took dad away and I, from that point, was to escort mom and her little boy to their hotel room as they were worried that the dad would somehow sneak back into the property. They were very afraid. I was walking them and I hear the mother talking softly to her son. "You see, your mama's strong and we'll be just fine. The two of us, we're gonna have a great trip. See that lady?" She gestures to me. "See, she's a girl too and look how tough she is. I bet they gave us the toughest guard around." Well, later, I got called again when they were ready to go to the parks, as they were still paranoid that dad would come back. I was walking them and the little boy looks up at me and says, "Miss, I'm scared. Are you sure we're going to be okay?" And I stopped, knelt down to his level, and said, "You're going to be just fine. Your mommy's really tough," and she was right. I'm tough too. And best of all, my best friend, Mickey Mouse, made sure to tell all the strongest, toughest people in the park to protect you today. He put extra magic to make sure you two have a great day, so don't worry, just have a fun. Double quote. He brightened up and gave me a hug, and it was the first time I almost cried on the job. I was at Disneyland a couple weeks ago and saw Darth Vader not cutting down younglings. It was just unprofessional as all heck. The effort they put into it just isn't the same anymore. Not a character but worked there. Disney has a hierarchy of what's important in a guest interaction symbolized by the acronym SCSE, which stands for safety, courtesy, show, efficiency. Safety first, obviously, and next is to be kind and courteous to everyone. After that, protect the magic, the show aspect of Disney by doing things like not walking through one land wearing another land's costume, or referring to Mickey as a real person instead of an employee in a costume, by saying things like Mickey's taking a break and not Fred's on lunch right now but he'll come out as Mickey in 15 minutes. And efficiency, which is basically another word for working hard. One time during the Buzz Lightyear show at the Tomorrowland Terrace, called Club Buzz at the time, a kid came up to the counter crying because Zurg was beating Buzz, put him to sleep using a weird device on his back, and so the kid was really worried. The mom wanted us to just tell him it's fake. We did, though thinking back on it, we could have say something show why like just keep watching. I bet Buzz will break out of his spell any minute now. But the kid was crying so me and the other cast member just told him what the mom wanted us to say. No consequences because the boss wasn't around. So. Story time. I have 3 cousins who have been Disney princesses, 2 of which are still at it. About a year ago my grandparents decided to go visit one of my cousins out at Disneyland Tokyo. My grandpa has relatively advanced Alzheimer's, but he is generally easy to handle. Anyway, somehow he got separated from my grandma and started to panic a little, looking for anyone he knew. Turns out the first person he found that he recognized was my cousin in full Cinderella character. They allow the characters to come out and walk around the park in Tokyo because the Japanese are super respectful. He started to talk to my cousin, calling her by her real name and quite directly asking her where his wife her parents were. He started to get pretty angry and frustrated when she wouldn't give him a straight answer. She kept character as best she could, but her handlers whisked her away pretty rapidly. He was reunited with the rest of the group soon after, but it was quite the scene. That's gotta be awful to have to keep in character for that. Not Disney, but I was Bugs Bunny and Wile E. Coyote at Six Flags. I was punched in the face and punched in the groin. The kid missed his target, thank goodness. But you can always tell. It's usually some dad whispering to his kid, smiling, and pointing at you. Then the kid nods, and confidently starts heading your way. That's when you know he's about to go for the nuts. Six Flags is such a crap hole. I feel like you could buy crack from Bugs. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.